Hey everybody, as kids are heading back to school, I had a couple thoughts that I wanted to share with you. For parents, grandparents, guardians, interested individuals that are invested in kids' lives. For those of us, maybe a lot of us, but especially those who have some notion of what ought to be, or how we're really intense about how we would like things to be, and maybe perfectionistic a little bit. And we say, okay, here's what a childhood should look like, or here's what early teens should look like, or this is when you do driver's training and now you get your license. And if we do these things and get the kids to um, participate in this group or that club or this sport or whatever, then we know that they will have had a good childhood, a good education, they'll be formed well, and we can be satisfied that we invested properly. We are rife with FOMO, right? Fear of missing out, right? And sometimes we take that approach with those in our charge, like our children. Even more so during the global pandemic when everything is changing and different now. What are my kids going to miss out on? What won't they experience? We look back at those who didn't get proper high school graduation or the proper parties for celebrating that rite or that ritual. And the scriptural witness isn't that we should be afraid of missing out. In fact, it's just the opposite. The scriptural witness is that we develop assets in these times that are less than ideal that will not only help our children, but will also help those around them as they turn into adults. Will help the world around them. Here's what I've been thinking about. So, King David, a lot of stories a lot of stories in the Bible, main story even, and he is a runt of a kid. And the day that Samuel comes to his house, asks his dad to get the boys lined up, and so he does, and he lines up the boys in the house, and he goes through from the oldest to the youngest, and after he's done, he said, "No, are you sure you don't have any other kids?" And they're like, "Well, we do got this little guy, but he's out tending the sheep." In other words, whenever there's something more important to do, or whenever the oldest kid and the next oldest kid, then the next oldest, or whether mom or dad doesn't want to do something, the littlest, the youngest, gets pinned with it. So David's out tending the sheep. And I would not say that being stuck with adult work by yourself when you're the youngest is the best plan for kids. Now I realize the culture is different, sheep herding is different. But alone is not ideal, even in sheep herding places today or then. And David is not there on the day that he is supposed to be anointed or called king. And David also, at different times, was out at night, keeping watch of the sheep. This is the shepherd's watch, where they have to stay up. It's like second or third or fourth shift, sometimes in the Bible, fourth shift. And that's also not what I would say is ideal. Not that didn't have some sort of consequences, I'm sure it did. But here's what I'm getting at. In unideal situations, we are formed in ways that become assets to ourselves and to those around us when we become adults. When he's out there at night by himself, he just happens to learn to play some instruments. He's got a lot of time on his hands. When he's out there at night by himself, he has time to look at the stars and to consider the world. He has time to consider wisdom. He has time to think. He learns how to think. He spends a lot of time out there by himself with the sheep, singing. He develops skills that pertain to keeping watch of sheep, like he can take a 6, 8, 10, 12-foot strap of leather and put a rock in it about the size of a pool cue and swing it around and hit a dime from some distance, because he would be doing that toward wolves or Asiatic lions that would come looking for meals in sheep herds. And he had to get good at that. And he had plenty of time to practice. And so he could, crack a wolf skull with a stone in a sling. And these things in this less than ideal upbringing become assets. When he sees the giant Goliath, who is the champion of an enemy, come decked out in metal, he's like, well, I can take care of this, just like I got stuck taking care of the sheep. I learned how to hit a lion or a wolf in the head. I can do the same thing here. Or it turns out later his instruments and his writing and his singing and his thinking, they become the majority of the Psalms. He learns to love God on the run, right? Which, for better or worse, he spends most of his life on the run. And so my point is that the ways that life changes and we become afraid that the kids around us aren't going to get the opportunities that we want them to have or that we had ourselves. The narrative of the scripture is that the difficult times mold us with assets that may not seem clear yet, but will present themselves as clear, and clear to have been the assets that the Lord wanted us to have as we grow and move into adulthood. And so I want you to not be afraid. I want you to have energy and motivation to try new things with your kids. When the old things wear out and when it is not yet known what the new things will be, that space can be one of fear or paralyzation, but it can just as easily be one of freedom because there are no more standards. Just give it a shot. Go for it. Learn to do and train your kids in new ways and new things. So there's the message for this week. Peace.